What if you could see the end approaching, not in a mystical vision, but in the quiet, everyday shifts of someone you love? Picture an elderly man, his once steady hands trembling as he lifts a spoon, or a woman who used to greet you with a warm smile, now staring blankly at a wall. These aren't just fleeting moments of frailty, they're whispers from the body, subtle signals that life's final chapter may be near. It's an unsettling thought, one that creeps into the corners of our minds and lingers. The elderly often display clear physical and behavioral changes in the year before they pass away. At first, these signs are easy to brush off as the natural wear of time. After all, aging isn't supposed to be graceful, is it? But medical experts have uncovered distinct patterns, a quiet language the body speaks when it's preparing to let go. In this journey, we're unveiling 7 key signs that frequently emerge in elderly individuals during their final year. Clues like unexplained weight loss or a sudden retreat from the world they once cherished. These aren't just medical footnotes, they're windows into what's unfolding beneath the surface, offering families a chance to provide comfort, dignity, and love in life's closing act. Stick with us until the end, because understanding these changes doesn't just prepare you emotionally, it might even open the door to interventions that could ease a loved one's final months. Whether you're watching for yourself or someone dear, this is knowledge that touches us all. Let's dive in. Number 1. Sudden, unexplained weight loss. Imagine Richard, an 82-year-old man with a broad chest and a hearty laugh that once filled his family's small dining room. For decades, he was the rock of his household, a retired carpenter who could still swing a hammer well into his 70s. But then, over a few fleeting months, something shifted. His jeans, once snug around his waist, began to sag. His flannel shirts, tailored to his sturdy frame, hung loose over his shoulders. In just weeks, he dropped nearly 15 pounds without a whisper of effort. No diet, no change in routine. At first, his daughter chalked it up to age. He was slowing down, eating less, wasn't he? But soon, the kitchen table grew quieter. Plates of his favorite roast chicken sat untouched, and the weight kept slipping away, leaving his cheeks hollow and his hands frail. When the family finally dragged him to the doctor, the truth unraveled. An undiagnosed illness was gnawing at his insides, silently sapping his strength. Sudden, unexplained weight loss is one of the earliest red flags doctors notice in elderly individuals approaching their final year. It's not the gentle shedding of a few pounds that might come with a lighter appetite or a slower metabolism. This is rapid, relentless, and often sinister. When an older person's body begins to shed weight without cause, it's a sign that something deeper is at play. Perhaps the digestive system is faltering, unable to pull nutrients from food, or maybe an unseen condition, cancer, heart disease, or organ failure, is quietly consuming the body's reserves. Muscle wastes away, leaving behind a fragility that creeps into every movement. Richard's story isn't rare. It's a pattern etched into medical charts across the world. Doctors warn that this isn't just about the numbers flickering on a scale, it's about what the loss reveals. The body, a marvel of intricate systems, starts burning through its own fat and muscle when it can't keep up, a desperate bid to survive as its machinery falters. Beyond the physical, there's an emotional weight to this change. Richard's family noticed his appetite fading first, how he'd push food around his plate, his fork hovering uncertainly. Once, he'd relished every bite of his wife's cooking. Now, even the smell of it seemed to turn his stomach. Was it the medications dulling his taste? A shift in his senses? Or was his body, nearing its end, simply saying it no longer needed the fuel? This decline in appetite often walks hand in hand with weight loss, a quiet refusal of sustenance that signals the body's retreat from the demands of life. For caregivers, the subtle cues pile up: a belt notched tighter, a ring slipping off a finger, the sharp edges of a collarbone peeking through thinning skin. These aren't just cosmetic shifts, they're calls to action. A doctor's visit might uncover a treatable cause, or it might confirm the inevitable. Either way, catching it early can mean the difference between months of comfort and a steep, silent spiral. If you see this in someone you love, don't let it fade into the background of normal aging. It's the body's way of sounding an alarm. Number 2, increased fatigue and weakness. Close your eyes and picture Margaret, 78, kneeling in her garden, her hands buried in the rich, dark soil she'd tended for decades. Her mornings were a symphony of color: red roses, golden marigolds, the soft hum of bees dancing around her. She was a woman who thrived on movement, her energy a quiet force that kept her family grounded. But then, the rhythm faltered. One spring day, her daughter found her leaning heavily on her shovel, breathless after just a few minutes of weeding. "I'm fine," Margaret insisted, waving off the concern with a tired smile. Yet the weeks stretched on, and the garden grew wild. Soon, even the short climb up her porch steps left her panting, her legs trembling beneath her. The woman who once danced through life was now tethered to an unshakable exhaustion, a shadow of fatigue that no amount of sleep could lift. This isn't the fleeting tiredness of a restless night. It's a bone-deep weariness that clings like damp fog, one of the most common signs that an elderly person's body is winding down. Doctors see it time and again: a sudden, profound fatigue paired with a creeping weakness that steals the strength from once capable limbs. For Margaret, it started small, pausing more often, resting her hands on her knees, but it grew into something undeniable. Her heart perhaps wasn't pumping as fiercely as it once did, leaving her muscles starved for oxygen. Or maybe her kidneys, quietly faltering, let toxins build up in her blood, sapping her vitality. The immune system, too, might be stretched thin, battling unseen foes and leaving little energy for the daily dance of life. Whatever the cause, this isn't just getting old. It's a signal that the body's intricate gears are grinding slower, redirecting what little power remains to keep the essentials running. The emotional toll is just as heavy. Margaret's daughter watched her mother's spark dim, how she'd nap in her armchair for hours, her once lively chatter fading into soft murmurs. Activities she loved, gardening, flipping through photo albums, even sharing a cup of tea with a neighbor, became mountains too steep to climb. Fatigue like this doesn't just sap the body, it drains the spirit, leaving behind a quiet resignation. Some describe it as moving through molasses, every step a labor, every breath a negotiation. For families, it's a slow heartbreak, watching someone slip away, not in a dramatic collapse, but in the gentle erosion of who they were. If you see this shift, tasks abandoned, a chair rarely left, a voice growing softer, don't dismiss it. A doctor might find a fixable culprit: anemia, a medication tweak, a nutritional gap. Or it might be the body's quiet preparation for rest. Either way, paying attention opens the door to care, to understanding, to making the most of the time that's left. Number 3, social withdrawal, and personality changes. Think of James, 80, standing at the heart of a crowded room, his booming laugh cutting through the chatter at every family gathering. With his weathered hands and quick wit, he was the glue that held his clan together, always ready with a story from his army days or a sly joke that left everyone in stitches. But then, the light in him flickered. His phone, once buzzing with calls to old buddies, sat silent. Invitations to barbecues and birthdays went unanswered. When he did show up, he lingered on the edges, his eyes distant, his words few. His daughter thought he was just tired, maybe a little down, but as months slipped by, James retreated further. A man, once larger than life, now shrinking into himself, as if the world he'd loved had grown too heavy to hold. This shift, social withdrawal and unexpected changes in personality, is a startling sign that often emerges in the elderly as their final year nears. It's not just shyness or a bad mood, it's a profound pulling away, a quiet unraveling of the threads that once tied them to their community. For James, it started with missed calls, then skipped events, until even sitting with his grandkids felt like a chore. Doctors point to a simple truth: the body and mind are intertwined. As physical strength wanes, fatigue setting in, pain creeping up, the energy for social bonds dwindles too. Conversations demand focus, outings require stamina, and when the body can't keep up, the spirit often follows. It's not always sadness driving this retreat. Sometimes, it's the body conserving what little it has left, turning inward as it nears the end. But there's more to it. James's family noticed other changes, a sharpness in his tone when he'd once been gentle, a confusion that clouded his eyes during simple chats. Was it frustration at his own limits? A medication throwing his mood off balance? Or something deeper, like organs faltering, sending ripples through his mind? Personality shifts like these, irritability, anxiety, even moments of disorientation, can stem from physical decline, from a brain struggling to keep pace as the body slows. For loved ones, it's a gut punch, often misread as rejection. He doesn't care anymore, they might think, when really he's wrestling with a body that won't cooperate. Recognizing this can shift frustration to compassion. Gentle visits, a shared silence, a favorite song. They can bridge the gap without overwhelming him. If this withdrawal pairs with other signs, a doctor's insight might uncover a cause or confirm the inevitable. Either way, it's a chance to hold space for who he is now, not just who he was. Number 4, recurring infections or slow healing. Picture Walter, 81, a man who'd spent his life tinkering in his shed, his hands rough from years of fixing engines and building birdhouses. He was the kind of person who shrugged off a cold with a cup of tea and a nap, his body bouncing back like it always had. But then, something changed. A scratch from a rusty nail in his garden lingered, red and angry, refusing to heal. A cold swept through him, then another, each one clinging longer than the last. His family noticed the pattern, how he'd cough through the night, how a simple cut on his finger turned into weeks of inflammation. Then came the tipping point, a urinary tract infection that spiraled into a fever, landing him in the hospital, frail and dazed. Walter's once sturdy frame, a fortress against life's small assaults, was crumbling, and no one saw it coming. Recurring infections and slow healing are stark warning signs that an elderly person's body may be nearing its end. The immune system, that invisible shield fending off invaders, begins to falter with age. White blood cells dwindle, inflammation dulls, and the body's repair crew slows to a crawl. For Walter, what started as a nagging cough became a cycle of illness. Pneumonia one month, a skin infection the next. Doctors see this often. A body too weary to fight back, where even minor wounds linger like uninvited guests. A bruise that once faded in days now stains the skin for weeks. A scrape that should have scabbed over festers instead. It's not just bad luck. It's a sign that circulation is stalling, that oxygen and nutrients aren't reaching the tissues fast enough to mend them. The subtlety of this decline makes it insidious. Walter didn't spike dramatic fevers or wince in obvious pain. His symptoms whispered, a low hum of fatigue, a vague unease. In older adults, infections can hide behind mild confusion or a dip in energy slipping past notice until they're severe. His family missed the clues at first. The way he rubbed his hands as if they ached, the flush on his cheeks they mistook for warmth. But beneath it all, his body was losing ground, perhaps to kidney strain or an unseen chronic condition draining its reserves. For caregivers, the signs are in the details. A wound that won't close, a cold that won't quit, a fever that creeps up without warning. Acting early, pushing for a doctor's visit, tweaking hydration or diet might bolster that fading shield. Sometimes, though, it's the body's quiet admission that it's winding down. Walter's story is a call to watch closely, to see the small battles as part of a larger war, and to offer care when the fight grows too hard. Number 5. Difficulty swallowing or loss of appetite. Imagine Helen, 83, perched at her kitchen table. The morning sun spilling across the checkered cloth she'd ironed 100 times. Her ritual was sacred. Coffee brewed just so, toast slathered with butter, a moment of peace before the day began. But one morning, her daughter saw the shift. Helen, chewing slowly, her brow furrowed, a faint cough escaping as she swallowed. The toast sat half-eaten, the coffee barely touched. "I'm just not hungry," she said, her voice soft with apology. Weeks later, even water seemed to struggle. She'd sip, pause, then set the glass down with a sigh. Her frame, once rounded with years of good meals, began to shrink, her cardigans draping over thinning shoulders. What started as a quirk became a quiet crisis, a signal her body was letting go. Difficulty swallowing, dysphagia, and a sudden loss of appetite are haunting signs that often emerge in an elderly person's final year. Swallowing seems simple, a reflex we barely notice, but it's a dance of muscles and nerves that can falter with age. For Helen, it might have been a neurological glitch, Parkinson's or dementia tangling the signals, or just the slow decay of a body shutting down non-essential tasks. Digestion, once a humming engine, grows sluggish, and the need for food fades. Doctors warn this isn't mere pickiness. When an older adult stops eating or struggles to get food down, it's often the body whispering that it's nearing rest. Helen's meals dwindled to crumbs, her excuses piling up. "It doesn't taste right," or "I'll eat later." But later never came. The fallout is brutal. Malnutrition creeps in, stripping muscle and sapping strength, leaving Helen's immune system too weak to fend off threats. Her daughter tried coaxing her with broths and soft fruits, but the effort felt futile. Each bite a battle, each swallow a risk. The danger isn't just hunger, it's the cascade. Weakness feeding into frailty, a cold turning deadly without reserves to fight it. Families grapple with this shift, torn between urging more food and respecting a body's quiet refusal. For Helen, small, rich meals might have helped, or a specialist's touch to ease the swallowing. But often, this is the body's gentle exit, a sign to shift focus from feeding to comforting. If you see a loved one push their plate away or choke on a sip, don't let it pass unnoticed. It's a plea for attention, a chance to ease their path with care and understanding. Number 6, unsteady walking or frequent falls. Think of Frank, 79, striding through his neighborhood, his steps sure as he waved to neighbors or hauled groceries from his truck. He was a man who moved with purpose, his body a testament to years of labor and resilience. But then the ground seemed to betray him. A stumble on the driveway, a wobble in the kitchen, small missteps he laughed off as old man clumsiness. Then came the fall, a tumble in the hall, a bruised arm, a sheepish grin. "I'm fine," he insisted, but the falls kept coming. His legs, once pillars, buckled under him, and soon he clung to walls for balance, his confidence eroding with every shaky step. Frank's world shrank to the spaces he could reach without fear, a man tethered by a body no longer his own. Unsteady walking and frequent falls are glaring red flags that an elderly person may be in their final year. Aging chips away at muscle and bone, but when balance deserts someone like Frank, it's more than wear. It's a system in decline. Sarcopenia might be stealing his strength, leaving legs too weak to hold him. Or perhaps his nervous system, dulled by time or disease, can't send the signals to keep him upright. Circulation plays its part too. Blood flows slower, legs numb, dizziness striking when he stands. Frank's family saw the signs, how he hesitated at curbs, how his hands gripped furniture like lifelines. Each fall chipped away at him, not just bruising his skin, but shaking his spirit, fear rooting him in place. The stakes are high. One bad fall, a fractured hip, a hospital bed, can unravel everything, triggering a spiral of infections or immobility that hastens the end. Frank's pride fought the cane his son offered, but pride won't mend a broken body. For caregivers, the clues are stark. A shuffle where there was once a stride, a pause before a step, a tumble too many. A doctor might pinpoint a fix, therapy, a med adjustment, or confirm the body's slow surrender. Either way, it's a call to act. Secure the home, offer support, cherish the mobility that remains. Frank's falls weren't just accidents. They were the body's plea, a warning to hold him close before the ground claims him for good. Number 7, confusion, hallucinations, or cognitive decline. Imagine Dorothy, 85, sitting in her favorite armchair, her silver hair catching the afternoon light as she recounted tales of her youth with a clarity that mesmerized her family. She was the keeper of memories, birthdays etched in her mind, old recipes recited by heart, her voice a steady thread tying generations together. But then, the thread began to fray. Her son noticed it first, Dorothy asking the same question twice in an hour, her keys lost in plain sight. Soon, she'd stare at the clock, unsure if it was dawn or dusk, her words stumbling over themselves. One night, she woke him with a trembling whisper, "Your father's in the hall again." Her husband, gone for a decade, stood vivid in her eyes, a hallucination so real it shook her. Dorothy's sharp mind was slipping, and with it, the woman they knew. Confusion, hallucinations, and cognitive decline are among the most jarring signs that an elderly person may be nearing their final year. The brain, that delicate engine of thought, demands a steady flow of oxygen and nutrients. When the body weakens, it's often the first to falter. For Dorothy, reduced circulation might have starved her mind, or an infection quietly disrupted its rhythm. Conditions like dementia or organ failure can accelerate the slide, scattering memories and blurring reality. Her confusion wasn't just forgetfulness, it was a fog that thickened over weeks, leaving her lost in her own home. Hallucinations added a haunting layer, voices in the silence, faces in the shadows. To her, they were as real as the chair she sat in, a sign her brain was struggling to pass the world. The shift wasn't just mental, it was physical, visceral. Dorothy grew restless, pacing the house at odd hours, her hands tugging at her blanket as if searching for something lost. Doctors call it terminal restlessness, a chaotic energy that surfaces as the body nears its end, a mix of discomfort and disorientation. Her family grappled with the change. How do you comfort someone who sees what isn't there? For them, it was a slow unraveling, watching her drift from the present into a maze of her own making. Yet these signs aren't always permanent. Dehydration or a medication tweak might lift the fog. More often, though, they're the body's final whisper, a signal that its systems are shutting down. If you see a loved one falter like Dorothy, words failing, reality bending, don't wait. Seek help, offer patience, and hold them through the haze. It's not just about losing memories, it's about losing time. Final thoughts. Take a breath and let these 7 signs settle in your mind. The unexplained weight slipping from Richard's frame. Margaret's exhaustion, rooting her to her chair. James pulling away from the laughter he once led. Walter's infections that wouldn't heal. Helen's food left untouched. Frank's falls stealing his freedom. And Dorothy's mind drifting into shadows. These aren't loud alarms, they're quiet shifts, easy to miss amid life's noise, yet they carry a weight that demands our attention. Recognizing them isn't about surrendering to despair, it's about stepping into awareness, about seeing the body's signals for what they are, a call to act, to care, to cherish. Each story here is a thread in a larger tapestry, a reminder that the end comes not in a single moment, but in a slow, tender unfolding. What hits you hardest? Maybe it's the image of Helen choking on a sip of water, or Frank clinging to a wall, his pride bruised as much as his body. Perhaps you've seen these signs in someone you love. Their plate pushed aside, their steps unsteady, their voice fading. Understanding these changes arms you with more than knowledge. It hands you the power to respond. A doctor's visit might ease a symptom. A gentle touch might soothe a restless night. Sometimes it's about shifting focus from prolonging days to enriching them, ensuring comfort and dignity in a chapter that belongs to them alone. The body speaks when words fail, and listening is an act of love. We'd love to hear your voice in this. Drop a comment below. What struck you most? Have these signs brushed against your life, and how will you carry this forward? Your thoughts fuel us, lighting the way for more stories that inform and uplift. If this journey moved you, give it a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Your support keeps this space alive, a place where we unravel life's mysteries together. Thank you for walking this path with us. We'll see you in the next one.